We live in a world where everyone wants to be heard, but few truly wish to understand. Social media, conversations, opinions, everything seems like a great arena where everyone fights to prove they're right. But amid so much noise, have you ever asked yourself what is actually being achieved? For if, in winning an argument, we lose our peace, what have we truly gained? Alan Watts used to say that arguing with a fool is like trying to teach a fish to climb a tree. Both end up exhausted, and nothing changes. The fool isn't necessarily the other. Sometimes he lives within us, in the voice that needs to justify, to convince, to be recognized. And it's precisely that need that imprisons us. The mind of the fool doesn't listen. It defends itself. It fights to protect what it believes to be its identity. That's why arguing with it is useless, because what's at stake isn't truth, but the fear of losing it. The wise person, however, understands something deeper. True strength lies not in reacting, but in remaining centered. For when the wind of conflict blows, the wise do not resist nor flee. They become the space through which the wind passes. Today I invite you to dive with me into this understanding, the silent art of non-reaction. Because silence is not weakness, it is mastery. And self-mastery is the beginning of true freedom. Chapter 1. The mind of the fool, the ego that needs to be right. The fool is not only the one who ignores, but the one who believes he already knows. He locks himself inside his certainties, like someone shutting the windows in springtime, fearing the breeze that could refresh the air. His mind is a room filled with old furniture, fixed ideas, inherited beliefs, rigid truths. There is no space for the new, because the ego has convinced him that making room is a sign of weakness. Jung once said that the ego is a necessary illusion, a mask that allows us to exist in the world. But when we confuse the mask with the face, we begin to defend the illusion as if it were life itself. That's what makes the fool fight. He isn't protecting truth, but his identity. And in that invisible battle, every conversation turns into war. Every word is a sword, every opinion, armor. The curious thing is that the fool lives in all of us. He appears when we feel the urge to correct others, when criticism wounds us, when the need to be right screams louder than the desire to understand. This is the voice of the ego, the part of us that fears disappearing, that believes yielding is dying. But here lies a paradox. The more we defend the ego, the weaker it becomes. For true power doesn't come from being right, but from being present. And presence doesn't argue, doesn't compare, doesn't impose. It observes, embraces, and dissolves. When consciousness awakens within us, we realize there's nothing to prove, because nothing is at risk. Truth needs no defense, it simply is. That's why the wise don't argue, they understand. They see the fool fighting with his own shadows, and instead of reacting, they remain silent. Not out of contempt, but out of compassion. Because they know the fool is only consciousness still asleep, trying to awaken through noise. And perhaps the greatest proof of wisdom is not winning debates, but recognizing when the ego wants to start one. Chapter 2. When we react, we lose. The vibrational trap of conflict. Every reaction is born from fear. The fear of not being heard, of being disrespected, of seeming weak. And driven by this impulse, we throw ourselves into the battlefield of words, where no one comes out whole. Reaction is the moment when we hand our energy over to the other. It's as if we were saying, "Here, take my center, do with it what you will." Alan Watts said, "When you fight with what is, you lose, but only 100% of the time." And that's exactly what happens when we react. We disconnect from the flow of reality. We begin to dance to someone else's rhythm, losing the beat of our own music. From an energetic perspective, every reaction is a dense vibration. The wounded ego creates waves of resistance that echo and attract more of the same. It's the principle of resonance. What we emit, we call back. When we react to a fool, we become part of their frequency, and in that moment we cease to be the observer and become the mirror of chaos. The wise, however, understand the difference between reacting and responding. To react is to act unconsciously, driven by impulse. To respond is to act with presence, from inner stillness. Response is born from clarity. Reaction is born from pain. So when provocation arises, the practice is simple, yet profound. Breathe. Observe the body, the chest, the mind. Feel the urge to defend yourself and don't feed it. The silence you create in that instant is the doorway to a new dimension of power. Remember, the fool survives on conflict. He needs your energy to exist. By not reacting, you completely disarm him. And what remains is your peace, intact, serene, untouchable. Because the one who does not react reigns over himself. Chapter 3. The Art of Silence, Transcending Without Escaping. Silence is the language of the wise, not the silence of avoidance but of transcendence, the subtle sound of awakened consciousness. Lao Tzu said, "He who knows does not speak, and he who speaks does not know." This isn't about staying silent out of cowardice, but recognizing that there are truths only silence can express. The fool speaks to be heard. The wise remain silent to listen, for they understand that every sound is born from silence and returns to it. And in that sacred interval, where there is neither defense nor attack, wisdom blossoms. But silence is not merely the absence of words. It is full presence. When you choose silence in the face of provocation, you are not withdrawing. You are rising. You are telling the universe, "I don't need to prove anything because I already am." This is the vibrational state of true power, the power of non-reaction. Imagine standing before someone who provokes you. The words come sharp, expecting a strike in return. But you breathe gently, your gaze remains calm, your body relaxed. There is no war within you, and therefore nothing can defeat you. The other, confused, realizes that their chaos found no echo, and silence begins to act as a mirror. It reveals imbalance without you saying a single word. Alan Watts called this the wisdom of emptiness, the strength that doesn't oppose but dissolves, because silence is not weakness, it is mastery. And the greater your inner silence, the more powerful your presence becomes. Now I invite you to reflect. Have you ever responded to an attack with silence? What happened when, instead of reacting, you simply observed? Share in the comments. Perhaps your silence taught more than 1,000 speeches. Chapter 4. The Inner Mirror, the Fool Within Us. The hardest thing to recognize is that the fool isn't only out there, he lives within us. He's the part that gets easily offended, that needs to explain, correct, justify. He's the fragment of the psyche that feeds on external validation and fears silence, because in it the ego dissolves. Jung said that what irritates us most in others reveals what we haven't yet accepted in ourselves. That's why the true spiritual work is not silencing the outer fool, but the inner one. The one shouting in our minds, demanding that others understand us, acknowledge our point of view, validate our existence. But the ego that seeks validation is really asking for love. And only when that love comes from within does the fool grow quiet. Observe, every irritation is a mirror. When someone provokes you, ask yourself, why does this affect me? The answer isn't in the other, but in the image they awaken in you. The external fool is only an actor playing the shadow you haven't yet embraced. There's a simple practice to dissolve that reflection. Next time you feel provoked, close your eyes for a moment. Feel the emotion without judging it. Don't fight it. Just watch it like clouds passing by. Soon you'll realize anger, pain, offense, they're all waves on the surface of your being. And deep down, in the unchanging silence, nothing was ever touched. The wise know that the other doesn't hurt them. They reveal them. Every fool is a disguised teacher, pointing to what still needs to be illuminated. And when you welcome that with gratitude, something shifts. The mirror clears, and the inner fool transforms into wisdom. The struggle ends. Consciousness breathes. Chapter 5. The Wise Response. Action without ego, compassion without weakness. There are moments when silence must act. When injustice manifests, when harm is done, wisdom is not to stay silent. It is to act without hatred. Silence is not passivity, it is discernment. The wise do not fight for ego, but for love. They correct what's wrong with the steadiness of one who prunes a tree, not to wound it, but to help it grow better. Alan Watts said, "You don't have to defend the truth, it defends itself." And yet, truth sometimes calls us to act. The difference lies in the source of the action. The ego reacts to win. Consciousness acts to serve. When you act from presence, there is clarity. You speak without hurting, correct without humiliating, intervene without needing to be seen. That is the energy of compassion, strength and tenderness intertwined. The wise don't seek to convert others, but to embody what others have not yet understood. They become the silent example that teaches more than any speech ever could. Think of a gardener. He doesn't yell at the weeds, he simply removes them with patience. So should be your attitude toward the fool. You don't need to react, only choose the ground where you plant your energy. And there is great power in that state. When you stop competing on the stage of the ego, the other loses interest in the fight. The absence of resistance dissolves the attack. The wise don't win because they're stronger, but because they don't fight. If this message resonates with you, remember to support the channel with a like and share this video with someone who needs to remember the strength that lies in remaining at peace. Because when you stop reacting, the world changes, not because the other falls silent, but because you no longer vibrate in the same game. Conclusion: the gift of stillness and the freedom of not needing to win. At some point on the journey, you'll realize that life is not a debate, it's a dance. And in this dance, there's no right or wrong, only rhythm. When you argue, you lose the rhythm. When you observe, you find the soul's beat again. The wise do not seek to be right, they seek to be at peace. For peace is not the absence of noise, but the presence of awareness. Alan Watts said, "Wisdom is the ability to laugh at your own seriousness." And perhaps that is the highest point of spiritual maturity, to understand that the world is a cosmic theater, and that every fool who crosses your path is only a mirror, a gentle reminder that there's still ego asking for attention. Silence is not an escape from conflict, but a return to the center. It's the moment when you stop being the character who needs to win and become the space where everything happens, serene, free, untouchable. So next time the world provokes you, smile, breathe. Don't rush to prove anything. Remember that truth doesn't need defending, it simply shines. And in the silent radiance of your presence, even the fool transforms, whether he realizes it or not. If this video resonated with your soul, share it. Leave in the comments, when was the moment you chose silence instead of reaction? Here, at the inner sanctuary, we continue learning to listen to what silence says, because within it lives the true intelligence of love.